Suppose Socrates were alive today. Would you hire him to be a TV interviewer? Do you think it would be informative and entertaining to watch Socrates interview our politicians and TV journalists? Socrates could change people's mind by engaging them in a process of reasoning and then revealing contradictions in their thinking. I'd like to show you a few examples of what happens when I use the Socratic technique to persuade politicians and TV journalists. First, I'll show you what happens when they're willing to reason. And then later, I'll show you some of the outrageous stuff that happens when they're unwilling to reason. Have you ever seen a politician admit that he's mistaken?
We talked about rational behavior. In the very first program, the point that I was attempting to make to you is that notwithstanding the fact that rational behavior is the norm we should seek and the ideal that we should seek, fear, hatred, vengeance, they are not rational human emotion. They're not based on on reasonableness, on the ability of man to reason the solution. They are, though, nonetheless, instinctive parts of human nature, which we constantly, in our society, attempt to control, suppress, and or illuminate through reason. Whether it's racial prejudice, whether it's pure vengeance, that is not rational behavior. And to the extent that our Constitution is designed to promote rational behavior, we advance the cause of mankind.
Well, I wouldn't put all of those emotions in the same group. For example, I agree with you that racial prejudice is always irrational. That's always a mistake. But fear could be rational. For example, I would suggest to you, suppose a tiger walked on this set.
That's a valid point.
Wouldn't it be...
I stand corrected. It's usually, what usually produces prejudice, what usually produces the kind of irrational behavior in the part of mankind is fear on many occasions.
Yeah, there could be irrational fear and rational fear.
I acknowledge
that was my only point.
That's a valid point. I stand corrected.
Do you think I can get Mike Wallace to admit that he was wrong? Is not lying one of your moral principles?
I would like not ever to lie.
Well, that's different than saying that you should never lie.
One should not lie. One should not lie. I should not lie.
Let me give you...
Have I ever lied? Yes.
Suppose somebody came in here right now and they came in with a machine gun. Yeah. And I knew that there was somebody out to kill you. And they asked me, is that guy Mike Wallace that's there sitting in the chair, or is he just an actor? And I would say, I don't think he's Mike Wallace, or I would lie to him.
Yes, indeed you would.
And would I be doing something bad if I lied?
Of course.
You think that would be wrong for me to lie to protect your life?
If it's going to wind up with the killing of this person?
Well, then I should, if I told the truth.
That door is closed, maybe we'd better put a lock on it.
But if I told the truth, I would expose your life. If I could protect you without risking my life, in other words, if I could persuade him that you were an actor, that you really weren't,
I see. I get
wouldn't it be right for me to lie?
Yes.
So then it's not always good to tell the truth, and it's good to lie sometimes.
Right.
But previously you had said that it's always wrong to lie.
I was wrong.
Okay, that was my point. Can I see that again?
I was wrong.
After interviewing Mike Wallace and catching him in a few contradictions, I asked him what he thought of my kind of interviewing. So you would like to see this kind of examination done to the important political leaders?
Oh, yes.
And
this kind of
discussion.
I think it would be utterly fascinating if you could get Bush and Clinton before the election to sit down for this kind of thing. I'd be sitting by my television set.
George Will was arguing that there aren't any principles you should always follow. Let's see if I can change his mind. So you would say that there are no principles that you should always follow?
Probably that's the case, yes.
Well, consider this principle, not murdering innocent people. Would you say that that's a principle that you should always follow?
If we understand the word murder that way, yes. I mean,
So,
clearly we send people into battle to kill one another. That's not murder. That's something else. So it's, yeah, okay, I'll take that principle.
so there are principles that
Yeah.
you should follow all the time. Let's see his reaction to the interview. We don't have any more time. It was really a pleasure discussing these issues with you.
Good fun.
Thank you very much.
Definitely.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the show?
That's fun.
Good?
That was very good.
Do you think I can persuade a black congressman to change the rules of the Congressional Black Caucus? Excuse me, Congressman, but the question was, is the Congressional Black Caucus using race as a factor to determine the entry into the caucus? And your answer was that they are. And we had agreed before that if you use race as a factor to determine the merits of entry into an organization, that would be racism. So isn't the Congressional Black Caucus practicing racism?
If you use your definition, that would be correct.
But you agreed
and
to
I agree to that definition,
definition.
and I would suggest to you that to the degree that one would define racism based on our initial definition, that would be absolutely correct. When one deals with the fact that you're talking about a grouping of folk who share the same race, who share the same ethnicity, and the definition of their responsibility of what they vote on here does not in any way cause injury, does not in any way mitigate against anybody's constitutional right. What you're saying is that 39 or 40 members of this body together have certain issues that are germane to their populations, and they're responding to those issues.
Racism is real, and you shouldn't practice it. It's a mistake and morally wrong. Then the Congressional Black Caucus should not practice racism. They should not use in their policy, they should not use race as a factor to evaluate the merits of membership.
It is not a stated policy. It is, but it is as an understanding that members of that caucus have to formulate policies that move us to where a member does not, that a black person has an ability to get a cab, where a black person has an ability to go where they choose to go.
But you are a member of that caucus, right? Why don't you propose that they change that rule?
I have no problem proposing they change the rule. If that would help us to be able to move through this process.
How about getting a congresswoman to reveal her true feelings on decriminalizing marijuana? Well, if they legalize drugs, then we would reduce the amount of prisons, right? Would you be in favor of that?
I'm not going there with you at
No?
all. I live in Indiana, not in California.
Okay. Okay.
I do come under fire because I believe that we ought to have a clean needle exchange program.
Uh-huh.
Because I think it makes sense.
But it would be true if your concern is that the prison industry is growing too much. Half the people in prison are in there because of drug violations, right?
Yes, according to what I read.
And so if they were free to take whatever drugs they wanted, then we wouldn't put them in prison. We wouldn't have to have all those prisons and pay for them in prison.
I think our criminal justice system would be better served to lock up people and throw the key away that commit violent crimes.
Oh, violent crimes, certainly, yes. But but when you
but
use drugs, you're not using.
Caught with a joint,
right.
I think we're wasting taxpayers' money by incarcerating individuals.
And that way we could reduce the prison industry and the burden on the taxpayer,
money.
Yeah.
And if we have a balance or we have a surplus, we can use it on education.
So you would be in favor of legalizing, say, marijuana?
I'm saying that I believe first and foremost that people ought to be incarcerated for violent crimes.
Well, I agree.
And if there's any space left, which I doubt if it would be, then you figure out what you do with the rest of it.
Well, you think it's morally correct to put them in for smoking a joint?
Frankly, I don't.
Okay. So let's get back to affirmative action and various programs.
I bet if you were caught smoking a joint, you wouldn't go to jail either.
I would not. I hope not, but
I'm not as confident as you are.
I think
if an African American was caught with marijuana on their person or in a vehicle in which they're riding, they go in jail.
But you agree that neither should go to jail, either an African American or a white person, right?
I don't think jails were intended for marijuana users.
Right. Okay. Do you think that examining a politician's reasoning and revealing his contradictions produces emotional intensity, dramatic tension, and outrageous actions that make it very entertaining? Let's see what happens when they are unwilling to reason. Is Congresswoman Collins contradicting herself on whether the Congressional Black Caucus racially discriminates against white congressmen and on whether it is bad to racially discriminate? Can a white congressman become a voting member of the Congressional Black Caucus?
Not to my knowledge.
He cannot, right?
Mm-mm.
So aren't they using race to evaluate this person's merits of entry into that organization?
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't you think that that's a racially discriminatory practice?
No.
Aren't they discriminating based
No.
on race?
No, no.
Well, what are they discriminating based on?
Race is part of it. Yes, they are racially discriminating.
Oh, so they are discriminating. It is racial discrimination, because before you said it wasn't.
But you asked me, was it bad? It's
Oh.
not racist discrimination.
Okay, so it's racial discrimination, but it's good.
It's racial discrimination, and it is. It exists.
Yes, but do you think it's good to racially discriminate
I
against
think
the
that-
white congressman?
I think that the Black Caucus should discriminate even against Republicans, African Americans. I think that.
But there are
I think
Republican
that
African Americans in the Congressional Black Caucus,
at
right?
this point in time, there is one
But
in the whole country.
okay, but then, so the basis for that organization is race. So if you don't have that race, you're discriminated against. That's why white congressmen can't become a member. So that is
But they are members.
racial discrimination.
But they are members. They are
But not
sustained.
voting members.
That's right.
So they're not full members, so they can't vote. So they are discriminating against them based on their race.
Okay.
But you think that that's good? Oh, first you said it was bad.
I think it's necessary.
It's necessary. So is it a necessary evil?
I don't think it's an evil. I think it's an evil that you have to have black caucuses. I think it's an evil that you have to have affirmative action. I think it's evil that you have to have a discussion on racism. I think it's evil that you sit here and don't seem to understand what racism is and what redress is. I think it's evil that you can sit here and act as though you were not very intelligent when I talk about racism today. That's what I think is evil, and that's what I think is wrong with America today. The fact that you can go into a courtroom and have blacks treated one way and whites treated another way, and have a judge say, "I'm not racist." And the
That's
fact for
wrong,
you,
right?
and the
But
fact,
if
the fact for you,
but
you would sit there and
if
say,
a black person discriminates against a white person based on race, that's not bad.
"Oh, yes, it is."
Well,
And-
before you
and
said
that-
it wasn't bad. How would you rate the emotional intensity of Congressman Pete Stark when I examined his claim that the more we owe, the wealthier we are?
So the idea that the national debt makes any difference is preposterous.
You don't think that what the national debt is
The
important?
national
Doesn't
debt
that mean that
measures
the
the
larger
wealth-
the national debt, don't we have to pay more
the
interest?
The wealthier we are.
The larger the national debt, the wealthier we
It's an
are?
indication of the wealth of the country, you're right.
So the more you owe, the more you're worth?
In federal account, in the national scheme of things, that's quite right.
So why shouldn't we borrow another trillion then next year?
Probably
So we can
because
become wealthy.
If we should not necessarily borrow another trillion, but we will, inevitably.
No, next
as
year. Shall we borrow another trillion so we can become wealthier?
A trillion, probably not. We're going to borrow a couple $100 billion next year because the Republicans are going to make tax cuts for rich people. That's stupid.
Are you going to vote
do
in
that.
favor of that deficit budget resolution?
No.
You're going to vote against?
Let's come back. The point is, again and again, I'll say it slowly, okay? That you are trying to make an enemy or build a scepter here out of the concept of debt, which for a nation is different from debt for an individual or a company.
Well, let me ask you this.
No, let me tell you something,
Okay.
and then you can ask. Secondly, we're borrowing every dollar we spend in this country at this time. Rarely have we had surplus expenditures in this country. The question is the growth, the rate of growth, or decline of the deficit. This is the important factor, okay?
Okay, but the larger the national debt, the more interest we have to pay, right?
Yes, Jen.
Okay, and hasn't the amount of interest that we have to pay increased tremendously in the last 20
As a
years?
percentage of what?
As a percentage of the federal budget?
No, as a percentage of gross domestic
But
product,
as
or
a
as a
percentage of the
constant dollars?
But
Come on.
As a percentage of the federal budget.
Did you ever study economics?
A little bit.
Where?
In the University of Puerto Rico.
Oh, in the University of Puerto
Yeah.
Rico. Do you have a doctorate in economics?
No, I don't.
Master's degree?
No, I don't.
How many classes did you take?
But these are
What I
simple
would
questions.
suggest is that you go, they're simple-minded questions
Do you
that
think-
don't relate
Well,
to the
explain it to me and the
realities.
viewers who don't have a doctorate in economics
Well,
how it is.
if
Let me ask you
you'd
this.
shut
Let me
up
ask you
for a
this question.
minute, why don't
Well,
you
let me
explain
ask
to your viewers? You're blabbing
me
away
ask
here
you the
about something
question.
you don't know anything about.
Well, let me ask you the
No, no,
question.
no, no.
I'm just trying to ask a question.
No, you're making
you
a
have to
lot
pay-
of stupid statements, Jan.
This is a question. Do you have to pay more money if the national debt is greater than if you don't, than if it is smaller?
Does who have to pay more?
The federal government. Does the federal government have to pay more interest if the national debt is greater than if it's smaller?
Depends on the interest rate.
Okay. Assuming it's the same interest rate, does the government have to spend more money on interest payments if the national debt is $5 trillion like it is today, as opposed to 400 billion when it was when you came into office? Does the government have to spend a lot more money in interest?
It may, yes.
And isn't that a burden on the government's budget, and therefore a detracting from the possibility of economic development?
No, it doesn't detract. It
But
may be
it
have been
increased-
used, the debt itself may have been used for economic development. Do you ever think of that?
So, but I'd like to get back to what you said before. So you think that if the national debt increases, we become wealthier. So I don't see why you don't want to go for it and go for $2 or $3 billion.
It's why you probably
million.
never graduated from a very good college, Jan. And I'm not going to take the trouble
Can
to educate you
us-
here.
Could you explain to the viewers that, and
look,
to
Jan,
me at the
come
same
on,
time,
get-
how it is that we
Jan,
become
get
more
real.
wealthy
Jan, get real.
by
I can't
incurring
explain.
in
If
$2
you
or $3
shut up,
trillion debts?
Jan, I think
this year.
I think this interview's come to an end. Someday, when you shut up and you want to talk about something, let's talk to
Well,
you.
let's
Thank
change
you.
the subject. No, let's just change the subject.
We're done.
Let's talk
Get
about
out of
something
here.
else. Let's just change the subject. We can talk about something else.
Listen, you get the fuck out of here. I'll throw you out the window. Out.
Let me see that again.
Someday, when you shut up and you want to talk about something, let's talk to
Well,
you.
let's
Thank
change
you.
the subject. No, let's just change the subject.
We're done.
Let's talk
Get
about
out of
something
here.
else. Let's just change the subject. We can talk about something else.
Listen, you get the fuck out of here. I'll throw you out the window. Out.
Now what I'd like to do is ask you if you think that this kind of interviewing can produce positive emotional intensity. Thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you, Jan.
Great interview. Thanks for watching.
Gosh, it's nice to hear somebody go through this syllogistic reasoning.
That's what we do here. Break
project.
it down. So
Do you show this in Virginia by any chance?
we plan to, yes. That's the plan.
I just want people hearing this sort of reason. It's just so refreshing.
Okay.
Never had such questions since I...
Thank you for the
I've
interview,
enjoyed this very
Congressman.
much.
It
Thank
was
you.
a great discussion.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks for watching. Just in time.
Very good. Did we do
It was
it
a
in 40
great,
minutes?
a
It was
great,
great.
a
Please
great,
come back
great
sometime.
discussion.
Yeah, please come
it was
back
very
sometime.
interesting to investigate your political theory
Yeah,
and
well,
see what the differences were. I admire the fact that you were willing to discuss your viewpoints,
absolutely.
which is outstanding.
I would like to do it again sometime. I really,
Let's pick a
one vote.
pick a topic. Will some congressmen steal the tape and try to steal the signed guest release in order to prevent their contradictions from seeing the light of day? Well, do you think that all legitimate governmental power is derived from the people?
I believe that, yes.
Okay. Do individual citizens have the right to initiate physical force against other individual citizens that haven't initiated force or violated anybody's rights?
Other citizens, other individuals have to act according to their moralistic, their religious, and their other positions. I don't know why you asked me the question.
Individual citizens have the right to initiate physical force against other citizens that have not initiated or threatened to initiate force against anybody, haven't violated anybody's rights, and are in their sound mind. Is that what you think?
I don't understand your question.
What are you talking about? You're not making any sense.
Excuse me.
It's a waste of time.
Excuse me.
This is a waste of
Apparently,
time.
the press secretary, Roddy Young, wants to participate in this interview.
No, this is a really.
And we would gladly interview him if he liked.
No, it's,
But,
your questions are inane.
Well, that's another insult. But what we're trying to do is investigate the political theory. Okay, why don't we do this? If you would like to be interviewed, I would gladly interview you on your viewpoint. But at the moment, I'm interviewing the congressman.
His time on about physical force.
You think it's a waste of time to know what he thinks the relationship is between the
I gave you
people
an
and the
answer.
government? Whether all legitimate governmental powers derive from the people?
You're not saying anything about anything that
Whether
actually
it's,
happened. What are you
do you
talking
think that that's wrong? Okay, well, maybe let's discuss that if you like, but let me finish the interview with the congressman.
I don't know.
No, I think we pretty well concluded it because this is a
Well, didn't you say it was
circular
good?
argument.
Well, didn't you say it was good to have rational discussions on federal budgetary policy?
I can't have a rational discussion
Well,
with you.
in what sense have I been irrational?
Because you've been, as my colleague up here said, inane. You keep repeating the same question. I've answered it to you.
This is not the same question. I'm asking you your viewpoint about what you think
and I gave you an
relationships between individuals in this society should be, whether they have a right to initiate force against other individuals.
I gave you an answer.
You think that they do?
I gave you an answer.
You said that if they thought that they did, if their religious beliefs permitted it, then it was okay. I'm just trying to confirm that you actually believe that.
You asked me, do I have a right to I answered your question. I don't know why you keep going back at it.
Okay, so it's your viewpoint. What is the difference between a criminal and a decent, responsible citizen?
You don't know?
Well, isn't it that a criminal is willing to initiate physical force against somebody who has not initiated or threatened to initiate force against anybody, and a decent, responsible criminal, a decent, responsible citizen would not do that?
If you had someone breaking into your house...
Are you going to terminate this interview?
I'm taking the microphone off, and am I terminating the interview? Yes.
Excuse me.
You're ridiculous. That's the worst interview I've ever seen. You're not. You have no substance whatsoever. I am appalled by your questions. You're wasting my time. You're wasting his time. You're going round in circles.
You have taken our property.
I have not taken anybody's property.
You took the tape.
I don't think so.
Yes, you did. Did he take the tape? He took it. Why did you take the tape? That is no, it isn't. That's my property. That's a violation. That's a criminal action.
Well,
he's stealing my property.
That was the subject we were talking about.
Right. We were talking about that. We were talking about whether it's right to initiate physical force against somebody who hasn't initiated force against anybody. This is a good example. He believes that it's okay to initiate force, to take money or to take tapes or property forcefully from somebody.
I think he's doing what I interpret here. You came here and you violated the respect that we gave you to have a rational interview.
How?
Well, by the kind of questioning and the lead questioning you were doing here. You were definitely trying to...
You think it's wrong for us to know what you think about these questions?
Well, you can do it.
Excuse me, Mr. Young, are you going to give us back that tape or are you going to steal it?
Tape.
You stole it.
I don't have it.
You took it. You took it to the other office. Are you going to bring it back or not?
I don't have it.
I think you should bring it back because that's a criminal violation.
Go, sue me. You going to use physical force on me?
No, I'm going to use the law.
Okay, go for it.
You have our tape.
Well, listen.
Okay, end of interview. Thank you for your time.
Well, but we'll gladly leave, but please give us the tape.
Bottom line, jeez, no wonder I haven't seen it.
Would you please leave?
I'll certainly leave, sure. This interview is over.
Where's the thing you signed? I would like that back.
Excuse me. Don't take these things.
I'm not until I get the police ticket. I want that
No,
document back.
you can't take my property. You don't have a right to take property. You know, you have to respect the law. Some congressmen will not be persuaded, but instead will make preposterous arguments in defense of a mistaken position. For instance, when Congressman Tucker tried to defend the exclusion of white congressmen from the Congressional Black Caucus, he found himself arguing that the Ku Klux Klan was not racist.
Oh, you don't agree with that?
Secondly,
oh, you should have said so.
No. I said as a general proposition, that's what it is. Secondly, you should remember when I talked, because I did say that as it relates to private organizations, that you cannot analogize that necessarily with employment situations, because everybody knows that people have a right of freedom of association. If the Black Caucus, or even if just some members of black people,
white supremacists can get together if they want.
They can get together and have the KKKs. Is that racism?
Yes, it is.
Me to come in? Oh, come on. And then the other thing I think, Jan, I wouldn't give a care. They can have their KKK
meetings.
I don't care either, but it's racism.
Will some congressmen say that they're amenable to discussing where they live according to their principles and then renege and thereby show their true moral principles?
I'm happy to answer questions about my personal life. No, let's exhaust this subject.
Okay.
Let's take this one to the bitter end.
Okay. In this interview, he said that human beings should follow a moral principle consistently, and we've identified one of his moral principles, and he's accepted that he doesn't follow it consistently. And I gave him a chance to think about that, and I like his response.
Let me tell you something, Jan. This is turning into an argumentative interview. You don't want to talk about principles. You're talking about my personal life and whether I adhere to principles that I believe in. I don't think that's any of your business, and I think this interview is over, okay?
Well, you don't think that it's good to have rational discussions about your fundamental conclusions?
Yes, and I'd like to see that release. There it is. Yeah.
Well...
Goodbye.
Excuse me, sir, but you've taken my property. Dozens of TV executives and news directors have evaluated my interviewing positively. Watch.
That's good. That's
so,
great. That's terrific.
What do you think? Do you think we caught him in a contradiction there, and he even denied what he said?
I think it's terrific, and I also...
Well, unbelievable, I'll put it that way. Gosh.
It's hard with public figures, though, to get them to go beyond their talking points, and it looks like you're able to do that simply by asking them questions they weren't really expecting.
That was very fun to watch.
I'm glad you like that. We're running out of time. Is there something you'd like to say before we end? Because we only have a few more seconds about this.
I just, from never having seen your program before, it's kind of refreshing to see politicians, and it looks like you interview journalists too, to make them think about why they do what they do and the positions they have. It's fascinating, and it's also fascinating to see their reactions.
Well, thanks a lot, Jeff.
Oh, thank you very much.
Have you ever seen a politician during an interview admit that he's mistaken?
I haven't seen elephants fly either. I don't think so.
Well,
this one was actually, I think, unique. I don't think I've ever seen quite the same setup occur. It's fascinating.
I'd say that's pretty close to nirvana. Yep.
Okay, well, we have a consensus. The principle that we're pushing in this program on public policy interviewing is our viewpoint that an interview that is a rigorous examination of a politician's thinking, that reveals any contradictions, and also produces emotional intensity, dramatic tension, and sometimes even some outrageous actions, would be the optimum in the field of public policy interviewing. What do you think?
Well,
have we made our case or not?
I think you've made your case. I think you've made your case.
Let's get to the bottom line. You want to watch politicians slip and slide, or do you want to see them nailed when they deserve it? Do you want a chit-chat interview, or do you want the emotional intensity and dramatic tension of an intellectual battle? Do you want an interview that is uneventful, or do you want to see politicians do and say things that are so outrageous that they make the news? Do you want an interview that doesn't get beyond the public facade of the politician, or do you want an interview that can actually reveal his true character? Do you want simply a sampling of opinions, or do you want an interviewer that can help the viewers differentiate between true and false opinions, as well as persuade the guests? Do you want a show that can grab large chunks of all segments of the talk market? That's what I want. I'd like to know what you want.